Hi, I'm making a survival crafting game where you play as the only sentient being in the whole galaxy, a robot named Blossom. Your goal is to terraform Mars and bring life back to it. The game is called Blossom, the Seed of Life, and if you're excited about it or want to support development, the best way to help is by adding it to your wishlist. It really makes a big difference and you will also get notified about future playtests and demos. Link is in the description. So far in this devlog series, I've added a temporary character, a procedurally generated planet, mining, and the main survival mechanic, power management, with lots of different power machines. Now, it's finally time to start terraforming Mars. But before we get into it, I want to thank all of you for the amazing support and feedback you have shared throughout this series. I read everything and your comments are incredibly valuable. So, let's kick things off with a few changes based on your suggestions from previous videos. First off, if you noticed from the intro, the robot is now officially called Blossom. And yes, I will be introducing a brand new model for her in this devlog. Next, the mining laser. You guys clearly wanted Iron Man, so I moved the laser beam from Blossom's chest to her hands. Also, someone suggested adding a shake effect when mining a resource, so that's in now too. A lot of you weren't happy with how the cable would just disconnect when Blossom walked too far. It was pretty frustrating, so based on your feedback, I removed the auto disconnect. Now, the cable stretches and slows you down the further you go. You can still move and connect it wherever you want, it's just slower now. Definitely feels less frustrating. When Blossom is close to powering off, many of you felt the current warning system was a bit boring and suggested some glitch effects instead, so I combined both. And yeah, it looks way cooler now. And finally, quite a few of you pointed out that my wind turbine blade designs kind of sucked. Fair enough, so I did more research and rebuilt them. The small turbine now has angled, evenly spaced blades, and we got shiny Neve designs for the medium and large versions too. Again, thank you for all your feedback, please keep it coming. Now, the game will feature 5 main categories of terraforming: pressure, temperature, soil, oxygen and life. Today, I will be working on pressure and temperature. Planet Earth has an atmospheric pressure of about 1013 millibars or 14.7 psi at sea level. As you probably know, we need the atmosphere, especially the oxygen in it, to breathe. But it does a lot more than that. A thick atmosphere protects us from harmful radiation, helps regulate temperature and keeps water from escaping into space. Mars on the other hand has just 0.088 psi of pressure, that's barely 1% of Earth's. Because of that, none of those benefits exist here. There is no temperature control, no radiation shielding and no way to keep liquid water on the surface. It either freezes or evaporates directly into space. So, if we want to bring life to Mars, step 1 is building up the pressure, and that's exactly what we're doing today. But before jumping into the pressure system, I want players to feel just how harsh and unfriendly this world really is, even to robots. I want them to feel the urgency to change it. I also want to give them a small taste of what's possible through terraforming right from the beginning. To do that, I'm adding 2 types of aggressive fog to the world. The first is a planet-wide volumetric fog that limits visibility and creates a sense of unease, especially in the early game. It also prevents players from seeing far ahead, so lifting it later on feels like a meaningful reward. The second is a dust storm effect to mimic Mars's frequent storms. I quickly put together a particle system to simulate this. It's not very fancy, but it works for now. Also, if you remember from previous devlogs, I added those little particles floating around to simulate dust movement. I'm using those here too, and they will become part of the terraforming progression. Now that the world is set up, it's time to increase atmospheric pressure. In real life, Mars actually has a lot of carbon dioxide trapped underground that could potentially be used to build an atmosphere, at least in theory. Obviously, this is all super hypothetical, but hey, this is a game, I can only stick to realism so much. The idea is simple. We place mining drills that tap into the planet's crust and release the trapped CO2 as long as they are powered and running. As you might remember from previous devlogs, every machine comes in 3 sizes: small, medium and large. You power them up, they start drilling and the pressure begins to rise. Let's run these for a while. As you can see, when we hit 750 pascals, the volumetric fog is completely gone. and at 1000, dust storms have fully cleared. It's super satisfying to watch the planet change in real time. Now, remember when I mentioned that without enough pressure, water just dissipates? Well, now that we are building up some pressure, it's time to show water actually forming on the surface. If you've seen the first devlog, you might remember that my terrain shader already supports blending multiple textures and normal maps. With a quick tweak, I've added support for color blending too. So now, as pressure increases, I can gradually make the entire world look icy, from top to bottom. Before I wrap up the pressure part, there is one more thing I want to add. When the planet gets cold enough to freeze, everything else, like machines and resource deposits, still look completely unaffected, and that breaks the immersion. I want everything in the world to freeze along with the planet. I created a small snow shader to handle this visually. That part was easy. The hard part was applying it to everything. Up until now, every object in the game had its own material. That's fine when you need lots of unique looking assets, but it's very expensive for the GPU. So I created a few shared materials that all world objects now use. This makes rendering much more efficient, and it allows me to apply snow shader to everything at once. Then I wrote a little component that controls snowy behavior per object, and here is the result. Pretty cool. There is also a nice little side effect. Since each object updates its shader gradually, everything becomes snowy on its own schedule. That means if you print a new building or mine a new deposit, it doesn't instantly look frozen. It slowly gathers frost over time, just like the rest of the world. Small touches like this really matter to me because they help build the kind of immersion I'm aiming for. Now, before I move on to temperature terraforming, it's time to reveal the new model for Blossom. I want to quickly mention that I don't use AI generated code or assets in the game. My experience with them hasn't been great. They usually don't create optimized code, and they are not quite ready to produce usable content for actual game development. Plus, there is the whole licensing mess, which doesn't look like it will be resolved anytime soon. That said, there is one area where I think AI is genuinely useful: visualizing ideas. It's great for sparking inspiration. I used ChatGPT to generate concept art for Blossom based on the previous model I was using. It gave me all kinds of weird and interesting results that helped me figure out what I actually wanted. Once I had a clearer idea, I tried to model it in Blender myself, but I'm not a 3D artist, and let's just say that didn't go well. So I decided to hire a professional 3D character modeling studio to help. I gave them everything I had, my ideas, the concept art, the reference materials, and after a couple of revisions, this is what they came up with. After putting her into the game, we now have a brand new Blossom. Then, it was just a matter of swapping out the animations, making sure the item slots worked, and updating the power bars to match. I really love how the model turned out. It's amazing to have a character that finally feels like she belongs in the world that I'm building. But it's also a little sad. I've spent countless hours staring at the old model while working on the game, so saying goodbye feels weird. Still, I think it was time. Back to the game. That's enough cold, I think. Let's heat things up again. Mars is a cold and barren world, with average surface temperatures around -60 degrees and dropping as low as -125 degrees near the poles during winter. If humanity ever hopes to terraform Mars, raising the temperature is a crucial first step. We need to bring it up to at least 0 degrees to support the possibility of liquid water and eventually life. To keep things simple, the game will start at -150 degrees and temperature terraforming will end around +30 degrees, giving us something close to Earth-like weather. Obviously, no one knows for sure how we would actually heat up a planet, but there are a few hypothetical approaches. The one that makes the most sense to me is using mirrors to reflect sunlight into the atmosphere. So, I designed these machines to mimic that behavior. When you power them, they slowly unfold, absorb sunlight, and amplify it to warm the planet. Somehow, they even work at night, which means you can use them as light sources too. A nice bonus. Once you run them for a while, they basically reverse what the pressure did to the planet. But there is something else happening as well. If you remember from the world generation devlog, I mentioned that craters will play a big role in terraforming. Well, it's finally time for that to happen. As the pressure rises and the planet gets colder, ice begins to form all around the planet. Because craters are lower than the ground, ice gets collected inside the craters. Since temperatures are still below 0, craters act as cold traps and the ice level starts to build up slowly. The cool part is, you can walk on it. But what happens when the temperature finally hits 0 degrees? Water on Mars. Finally, and it's going to be super important for bringing life back to the planet. This water shader has some awesome features like waves and foam, which become more noticeable once you pass the 0 degree mark. It really brings the world to life. After all this is done, I tried to create a build and test the performance of the game so far, but I was immediately hit with a bunch of issues, mostly caused by the fog systems I added. The particle effect I created for the black dust turned out to be too heavy. After optimizing the amount, it didn't really look that visible anymore. Honestly, I wasn't a huge fan of it anyway, so it went straight to the bin. Instead, I created another volumetric fog system with different parameters to better mimic the dust storms. It looks way better and it is much more performance friendly. Before I go, there is one more thing I want to add. Since we now have water, Blossom can actually walk underwater. If you remember, I mentioned how much I love the game Subnautica back in the very first devlog, and even though this is Mars, I think it will be nice to bring in some underwater vibes too. So, I added a large volume below the ground. Whenever Blossom goes underwater, the screen now turns blue, and for full immersion, I added a subtle underwater ambient sound effect when you are below the surface. Hopefully one day, there will be fish swimming in this nice little lake. And that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed the progress so far. I've still got a long road ahead, but I'm planning to open up playtesting as early as possible to get more feedback from all of you. These will be hosted on Steam, and if you want to take part in the playtest or support the development, wishlist the game on Steam. The link is in the description. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.